Imagine walking into this, like, massive cavernous room, and inside this room, there are 100 radios.
Sounds intense already.
Oh, it gets worse. They are all switched on, they are all turned up to maximum volume, and every single one of them is tuned to a completely different station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you've got political talk shows blaring over heavy metal, weather reports clashing with classical music, people arguing, people crying, just, deafening noise.
Right. Total sensory overload.
Exactly. It's completely overwhelming. And your very first instinct, the only thing you would want to do in that moment is to find the main power switch and just, turn it all off. You'd crave the silence.
Of course. Anyone would.
But what if you couldn't? What if that cavernous room with all those blaring radios is actually inside your own head?
That is, well, it's an exhausting image, but if we are being completely honest, for the vast majority of us, it is an incredibly accurate description of our daily reality.
It really is.
We're trapped in this state of relentless, involuntary mental noise.
Yeah.
It's just the background static of our entire lives.
And that static, that noise, is exactly what we are going to be unpacking today. So welcome to the Book Nook.
So glad you're joining us.
We are absolutely passionate about exploring the most impactful, the most transformative books in the realms of self-help, spirituality, psychology, and just, personal growth.
The books that really shift your perspective.
Exactly. And today, we are taking a deep dive into a book that has genuinely altered the landscape of modern spirituality. We are talking about The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle.
Such a monumental book. I mean, the word-of-mouth journey of this text alone is incredible.
Oh, yeah. It started with him just hand-delivering poppies to, small bookstores in Vancouver.
Yeah, but really dropping them off himself.
Yeah.
And it went from this underground, secret bestseller to a massive global phenomenon.
Oh, boy.
Especially once Oprah championed it.
Totally. But before we get into the actual mechanics of how to turn off those mental radios we talked about, we really have to look at the crucible in which this book was forged.
We have to look at his origin story.
Right, Tolle's own story, because it is quite extraordinary. Until he was 29 years old, his life was not characterized by peace or enlightenment or anything like that.
Quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah, he describes living in a state of almost continuous anxiety, and that was interspersed with periods of deeply severe suicidal depression. He was basically living a nightmare.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is how universal that feeling of despair is, even if, Tolle experienced it to an extreme degree.
Right. A lot of people can relate to that low-level hum of anxiety.
Exactly. But for him, he reached a point where the psychological pain became completely unbearable. And it all culminated one night, shortly after his 29th birthday.
The breaking point.
Yeah. He wakes up in the early hours of the morning, and he's just gripped by this feeling of absolute paralyzing dread.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
The world around him, the furniture in his room, the distant sound of a train, it all feels utterly alien, hostile, and completely meaningless. He feels this deep, profound loathing for his own existence.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It is. He reaches a definitive breaking point. And in that moment of absolute despair, a single thought crystallizes in his mind, and it repeats over and over. He thinks, I cannot live with myself any longer.
I cannot live with myself any longer. And see, here's where it gets really interesting, because suddenly his consciousness sort of steps back and he looks at that very thought.
Right? He observes it.
Yeah, he realizes how peculiar it is. He asks himself, wait, am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me. There's the I, and then there's the self that I cannot live with.
Which is a huge cognitive leap.
And then he has this stunning realization. He thinks, maybe only one of them is real.
And that realization is the pivot upon which his entire life turns. He accidentally stumbled upon a profound cognitive dissonance. The sheer shock of that insight literally stopped his mind.
The radio's just turned off.
The machinery of his thinking lost power. He reports feeling drawn into this vortex of energy, gripped by intense fear, and hearing a voice within his chest say, resist nothing. So he surrendered. He allowed himself to fall into what felt like a void within himself. And when he woke up the next morning, the transformation was absolute.
It's like a movie. He wakes up to the sound of a bird chirping outside his window, and he says he had never truly heard such a sound before.
Like he was hearing for the first time.
Exactly. He opens his eyes, and the morning light filtering through the curtains feels like love itself. He looks around his room, picks up a pencil, an empty bottle, and he is just marveling at the sheer beauty and aliveness of it all.
It's pure presence.
Yeah. He spends the next 5 months in a state of uninterrupted deep peace and bliss. And eventually he ends up spending almost 2 years just sitting on park benches in London in a state of the most intense joy, just watching the world go by.
Just sitting there.
Yeah, he had no job, no home, no socially defined identity, but he had found the ultimate treasure.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what happened to him, as he later understood after studying various spiritual traditions, was that the intense pressure of his suffering that night forced his consciousness to completely withdraw from its identification with the unhappy, fearful self.
That false self just collapsed.
Exactly. That false self, which is ultimately a fiction created by the mind, it just deflated. It was like pulling the plug on an inflatable toy.
Yeah.
What remained was his true nature.
Pure consciousness.
Right, the ever-present I am prior to any identification with form.
Which sounds beautiful, but let's make this tangible for you listening right now, because how do we actually do that? I mean, I don't want to have to hit rock bottom or experience a suicidal dark night of the soul just to find some peace, you know?
No, of course not, and you don't have to.
So to figure this out, we have to examine the primary obstacle, the fundamental barrier that prevented Tolle from experiencing peace for 29 years, and the exact same barrier that prevents you from experiencing it right now.
The mind itself.
The mind itself. And Tolle opens the book with a very powerful parable about a beggar to illustrate this.
It's a striking story. So there's a beggar who has been sitting by the side of the same road on this old box for over 30 years.
30 years on the same box?
Yeah. One day, a stranger walks by. The beggar mechanically holds out his baseball cap and mumbles, "Spare some change." The stranger says, "I have nothing to give you."
Classic rejection.
But then the stranger stops and points down. "What's that you were sitting on?" The beggar says, "Nothing, just an old box. I've been sitting on it for as long as I can remember."
Right.
The stranger insists, "Ever looked inside?" The beggar scoffs. "No, what's the point? There's nothing in there." But the stranger keeps pushing. Finally, the beggar manages to pry open the lid of the box, and he is absolutely astonished.
Because it's full.
The box he has been sitting on for 3 decades is completely filled with gold.
And Tolle is basically telling you, the reader, I am that stranger. He's saying, I cannot give you some new belief system or a new mental framework to acquire. I am simply telling you to look inside.
Look in the box.
Exactly, because those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars.
Even if they're wealthy in the material sense.
Right. You could have a massive bank account, a perfect family, a great career. But if you are looking outside yourself for scraps of pleasure or validation or security, you are blind to the fact that you are sitting on a treasure infinitely greater than anything the world could possibly offer.
And the reason we don't look inside, the reason we don't realize we are sitting on the gold, is because of what Tolle calls the disease of compulsive thinking.
The disease, that's a strong word.
It is. We are totally identified with our minds. Consider René Descartes' famous philosophical statement, "I think, therefore I am."
Right. I mean, that's the bedrock of Western rational thought.
Exactly. It's treated as the foundation of our whole society. It essentially states that human existence is defined by the capacity for thought. But Tolle argues that Descartes actually made a massive fundamental error here.
Let's unpack that error, because it is huge. Descartes equated thinking with being and identity with thinking. But if you are your thoughts, what happens when you aren't thinking?
You cease to exist, according to that logic, yes.
Which is absurd. The Tolle points out that equating our identity with our mind is the root of the human dysfunction. We believe that we are our thoughts. And because the mind is always active, the compulsive thinker lives in a state of apparent separateness.
An insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict.
Exactly. This incessant mental noise creates this, opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, and judgments. That screen comes between you and yourself, between you and nature, between you and other people.
It creates the illusion that you are completely separate from the rest of the universe.
Calling thinking a disease, though, I mean, you mentioned that earlier. Let's talk about why he categorizes it that way.
Well, a disease happens when things get out of balance.
Yeah.
Think about cells multiplying in a body cell division is perfectly natural and necessary. But when it disregards the total organism and multiplies endlessly, it becomes cancer.
Right. It takes over.
The mind is a superb instrument when used rightly. It is a highly evolved tool for survival. But when it uses us, when it runs completely unchecked in the background, it it becomes destructive.
You think you are the one running the show, but the instrument has actually taken you over. You are possessed by it without even knowing it.
Yes, possessed is a good word for it.
And this phantom mind-made self is what Tolle refers to as the ego. Now, we should clarify, when we say ego here, we aren't talking about someone being arrogant or full of themselves.
Right, not the colloquial meaning.
We are talking about the false sense of self that consists purely of mind activity. And because it is a phantom, it is deeply vulnerable. It needs continuous thinking just to survive.
And this raises an important question, and it's where a lot of readers hit a wall. If the ego is just a phantom, and thinking is a disease, what are we supposed to do? Stop thinking.
Yes. I have a really hard time swallowing this part initially. I mean, I don't want to lose my mind.
Nobody does.
If I don't use my mind, won't I just regress? Won't I just become like a plant or an animal acting purely on instinct? I need my mind to survive in the modern world. I need it to solve complex problems at work, to pay my taxes, to navigate relationships.
Of course.
Tolle uses this great analogy. He says, comparing the mind to a survival machine is accurate. It's like a dog that loves to chew on a bone. The mind just loves to get its teeth into problems. So if I take the bone away, am I just rendering myself useless in society?
That is probably the most common point of resistance, because our entire educational system and culture, well, they revere the intellect above all else.
We're graded on it from day one.
Exactly. But Tolle clarifies this beautifully. He explains that enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought, like an animal or a plant.
Okay, so it's a step up, not a step down.
Right. The predominance of mind is just a stage in the evolution of consciousness. In the enlightened state, you absolutely still use your thinking mind when needed, but you use it in a much more focused and effective way.
You use it, it doesn't use you.
You use it for practical purposes, but you are free of that involuntary, continuous internal dialogue.
It makes me think of a computer. Right now, our minds are like a computer that has 80 different intensive background processes running at all times.
Oh, totally.
It's eating up all the RAM, the fan is spinning loudly, the battery is draining rapidly, and you aren't even actively using the computer.
Just burning out the hardware.
Right. So Tolle isn't saying to throw the computer out the window. He is saying close the background apps. Use the processor when you actually need to write a document or calculate a spreadsheet, and then let it rest in a state of quiet readiness.
That analogy perfectly captures the biological toll this takes on us, too. When those background processes run constantly, our nervous system is continually flooded with low-level stress hormones.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly. The mind is a survival machine. It's great at gathering, storing, and analyzing information. It's great for attack and defense. But it is not inherently creative.
Interesting.
Tolle points out that all true artists, whether they realize it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. The mind merely gives form to the creative impulse that arises from that deeper place.
So the inspiration comes from the silence, and the mind just executes it.
Right. He even cites a nationwide inquiry among America's most eminent mathematicians, including Albert Einstein, which found that thinking plays only a subordinate part in the brief, decisive phase of the creative act itself.
Wait, really? Einstein?
Yes. The breakthroughs happen in the gaps of stillness. The aha moment doesn't come from grinding the gears harder. It comes when the gears stop.
Okay, so if we accept that we need to close these background apps, how do we actually find the task manager? Because he asks a terrifying question in the text. He says, have you found the off button?
And the honest answer for almost everyone is no.
A hard no. But he gives a very clear, actionable insight. The first step to freedom. He calls it watching the thinker. What is the actual mechanics of doing that?
It starts with simply recognizing the voice in your head. Tolle notes that if you walk down the street and see someone muttering endlessly to themselves, you might assume they are mentally unwell.
Sure.
But quote-unquote normal people do the exact same thing. We just don't do it out loud. We have a continuous monologue, commenting, speculating, judging, complaining, worrying.
Non-stop.
To watch the thinker means to start listening to that voice as often as you can. Pay particular attention to repetitive thought patterns, those old record albums playing in your head for years.
But the key, and this is so crucial because it's where I always tripped up, is to listen impartially. You can't judge the voice.
No judgment.
Right. You can't listen to a negative thought and then mentally beat yourself up for having a negative thought, because if you do that, it's just the exact same voice coming in through the back door in a different disguise.
It's the ego analyzing the ego.
Exactly. It's like the voice says, I'm going to fail that presentation tomorrow. And then the voice immediately chimes back in and says, ugh, why are you behaving so negative? You're so bad at this mindfulness thing.
Which just creates more noise.
That's still the ego. You have to
Yeah.
be the completely neutral witness. You just notice, there is a thought about anxiety over tomorrow's meeting. And you are the presence watching that thought.
And this is where the mechanics of consciousness shift.
Mhm.
The moment you listen to a thought and recognize there is the voice, and here I am listening to it, a new dimension of consciousness has come in.
You separate from it.
Yes, this sense of your own presence, this I am realization, is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. When you observe the thought, it loses its power over you. You are no longer energizing it by identifying with it.
You stop feeding it RAM.
Exactly. The thought subsides, and you experience what Tolle calls a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind.
A gap. It might just be a fraction of a second at first. But in that gap, you feel a sense of stillness and peace. You feel a subtle emanation of joy arising from deep within. That is the joy of being. That is the gold inside the box.
And this brings us to a critical realization. If the mind is the engine of our suffering, we have to look at what fuels that engine. What keeps the mind endlessly spinning?
What's the gas in the tank?
The fuel, without a doubt, is time. The ego, this phantom self we've identified, sustains itself entirely through the past and the future.
So what does this all mean? Tolle makes what sounds like a completely radical, almost absurd assertion at first. He says that nothing ever happened in the past, and nothing will ever happen in the future. Everything only ever happens in the now.
It sounds like a philosophical riddle, but he insists it is a stark, literal fact. Consider the mechanics of human memory and projection. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now?
Well, no, you can't.
It's impossible. What you think of as the past is actually a memory trace stored in the brain, a record of a former now. And when you remember the past, you reactivate that memory trace, and you do it right now.
Right. And the future is just an imagined now. It's a projection of the mind. When the future finally arrives, it arrives as the now. When you sit around worrying about the future, you are doing that worrying now.
Exactly.
Past and future have no reality of their own. They are like the moon, which has no light of its own but can only reflect the light of the sun. Past and future are just pale reflections of the light, power, and reality of the eternal present. The now is all there ever is.
But obviously, to function in human society, we have to navigate time. Tolle doesn't deny this, but he makes a vital distinction between clock time and psychological time.
Okay, clock time versus psychological time.
Clock time is practical. It's making an appointment for 3:00 p.m. It's learning from a mistake you made yesterday so you don't repeat it today. It's setting a goal and taking the physical steps to move toward it.
Clock time is using time as a tool, but psychological time is the disease. Psychological time is when you tie your identity to past trauma, or when your mind creates an obsessive need to arrive at some future point because you believe it holds your salvation.
Yes, the I'll be happy when syndrome.
Exactly. It's that constant background belief that one day when I get that promotion or meet the right person or finally buy that house, then I will be happy and complete. It's treating the present moment as a mere means to an end.
And that psychological time is incredibly toxic because it creates a state of perpetual waiting. Tolle divides this into small-scale waiting and large-scale waiting.
Okay, what's the difference?
Small-scale waiting is being frustrated in a traffic jam or standing in line at the grocery store. Large-scale waiting is waiting for the kids to grow up, waiting for a better job, waiting to become enlightened.
Just always putting off life.
Right. Both forms are a fundamental rejection of the present moment. You are treating the only thing that actually exists the day demand you. Now is merely a stepping stone or an annoying obstacle to get to an imagined future.
It's like playing a massive, beautiful, open-world video game, but instead of actually looking at the scenery or experiencing the world, you just stare obsessively at the little mini-map in the corner of the screen, just watching your dot move toward the objective marker.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You completely miss the game because you are so obsessed with the destination. And he points out the profound collective danger of psychological time throughout human history. When entire nations get infected by psychological time, the results are literally catastrophic.
This is one of the most sobering observations in the text. He looks at macro-level belief systems like communism or extreme nationalism.
Okay.
These ideologies operate under the assumption that the highest good lies in a projected future. They envision a future heaven, a utopian society of equality or total liberation.
But it's always in the future.
Always. And because that salvation is located in the future, the end justifies the means in the present. Tolle notes that an estimated 50 million people were murdered to further the cause of communism in Russia, China, and elsewhere.
50 million.
50 million human beings slaughtered in the present moment to build a hypothetical, better world in the future. It's the ultimate proof that belief in a future heaven easily creates a present hell. Psychological time isn't just a personal neurosis, it is a dangerous collective mental illness.
Wow, that really scales up the danger of not being present. But let me challenge this a bit, because this is where my mind really struggles to integrate this into a modern lifestyle.
Sure, okay.
If I accept now completely, if I stop living for the future, don't I lose my drive? If I'm totally content sitting on a park bench in the team, now how do I pay my rent? How does society progress? How do we build hospitals or cure diseases if everyone is just blissed out in the present moment?
It's a crucial distinction to make. Tolle answers this by bringing in the concept of karma yoga, or consecrated action.
No yoga.
Yes. When you free yourself from psychological time, you do not stop pursuing goals. The what you are doing might not change at all, but the how changes entirely.
Okay, explain that.
When you act without psychological time, you play the game of the outer world with joyful energy. You are completely free from the fear of failure because your inner sense of completeness no longer depends on the outcome.
So it's the difference between starting a business because you are terrified of feeling inadequate and you believe that becoming a millionaire will finally prove your worth to your parents.
Right. Huge burden.
Versus starting a business simply because you find deep joy and vibrancy in the act of building something step by step, entirely present in the daily effort. If the business fails, your identity isn't crushed because your identity wasn't tied to the future outcome in the first place.
Precisely. You still use clock time to plan the business strategy and execute the daily tasks, but you aren't obsessed with the destination to the point of missing the journey.
The journey becomes the point.
Yes. The outer purpose of your life, achieving things in the world of form, becomes completely subservient to the inner purpose, which is the deepening of your being in the vertical dimension of the timeless now.
Okay, so if we are constantly fleeing the present, if we are always running away into the past or the future, what happens to all the unprocessed negative emotion we are running away from? Where does all that negative energy go?
It doesn't just vanish.
Right, because we don't just feel a little empty when we resist the past. Now we actually accumulate and trap emotional pain within ourselves.
And this brings us to one of Tolle's most profoundly impactful and frankly unsettling concepts. He defines the pain body.
The pain body.
The pain body is a semi-autonomous energy field of trapped past pain. Every time you experience emotional pain and you are not fully present to face it, which is most of the time for an unconscious person, that pain leaves a residue.
Like a scar.
Like an energetic residue.
Yeah.
Over a lifetime, these residues merge and accumulate. It occupies your body and mind as a negative energy field. Tolle even suggests that looking at it as an invisible entity in its own right brings you very close to the truth.
A parasitic entity made of old pain. It sounds like a horror movie, but it feels so undeniably true when you examine your own life. He says this pain body has two modes, right? Dormant and active.
Yes. It might be dormant 90% of the time, but for someone deeply unhappy, it could be active 100% of the time.
And anything can trigger it to wake up, especially if a situation resonates with a pain pattern from your past. An innocent remark from your partner, a specific tone of voice, an email from your boss, and boom, the monster wakes up.
To understand how this works mechanically, we have to look at the biology of emotion. Tolle explains that emotion arises at the place where the mind and the body meet.
Okay.
It's the body's physical reaction to your mind. If your mind is projecting a threat, even a psychological one, like someone disagreeing with your political opinion or cutting you off in traffic, the body doesn't know the difference between that and a physical predator.
It just reacts.
It contracts. It prepares to fight or flee, flooding your system with adrenaline and cortisol. That physical contraction is fear or anger. And the pain body, this energetic entity, loves that biochemical rush of negativity. It feeds on it.
It wants to survive, just like any other entity. And its only food is more pain. It feeds on drama and conflict. So when it awakens, it effectively takes over the host. It becomes you.
It literally hijacks you.
And once it takes over, it actively seeks out situations that reflect its own frequency. It will provoke an argument out of thin air. It will cause you to perceive an attack where there isn't one. It will make you crave emotional violence or plunge you into depression.
And this often develops into a vicious cycle. The thought pattern creates an emotion, and the vibrational frequency of the emotion feeds the thought pattern.
Like an echo chamber.
Exactly. You think about how you were wronged by your coworker. You feel the anger tightening your chest. That physical anger sends a signal back to the brain saying, yes, we are under attack, keep thinking about this, which makes the thought seem even more justified, which creates more anger.
I have a really hard time swallowing this part of the book, to be completely honest. Let me push back on that a bit.
Go for it.
Tolle is basically saying we're choosing to be miserable. But if you look at someone with clinical depression or someone going through a horrific divorce or someone grieving a massive loss, telling them they unconsciously want the pain feels incredibly dismissive. Nobody consciously chooses to suffer. We all want to be happy.
That pushback is entirely valid, and it's vital to handle this nuance carefully. Tolle is not victim-blaming or minimizing the reality of grief and trauma.
Right.
The key word you used is consciously. Nobody consciously chooses it.
Right.
But the ego is deeply, fundamentally addicted to unhappiness on an unconscious level.
Why would it be addicted to that?
Let's look at the psychology of identity. If a person has built their entire sense of self around a victim story, the terrible things that were done to them, the specific traumas they survived, the injustices they've suffered, then losing that pain feels like a literal loss of self.
Oh, wow.
Who would they be without their drama? Who are they if they aren't the person who is wronged? The ego feels deeply threatened by the prospect of letting go of the pain, because the pain has become the architecture of their identity.
So it's not that they want to hurt, it's that they are terrified of disappearing. The pain body is actually terrified of the light of your consciousness.
Precisely. Its survival depends entirely on your unconscious identification with it. If you step back and say, oh, wow, look at this heavy, dark energy of resentment welling up inside me right now, you are no longer the resentment. You are the watcher of the resentment.
And that is the alchemy of transmutation that Tolle outlines. How do you actually dissolve this pain body? You don't fight it. Fighting it creates inner conflict, which just feeds it more pain.
Right. You can't fight it.
You simply focus your attention on the feeling inside you. You feel it directly in the body without labeling it mentally, without thinking about it, without judging it, and most importantly, without making an identity out of it.
It requires immense presence. You are literally taking the base metal of suffering and transmuting it into the gold of pure consciousness.
The alchemy.
Yes. As you watch the pain body, its energy is severed from your thinking mind. It can no longer use your thoughts to replenish itself. It might spin its wheels for a bit, like a ceiling fan after you turn off the switch, but its power over you is broken.
So we've mapped out the egoic mind, psychological time, and the pain body. We know we have to face this pain body with presence. But in the reality of a busy Tuesday morning with 100 unread emails and the kids screaming, exactly how do we access this state of intense presence?
It's hard in the moment.
Tolle provides specific gateways, or what he calls portals into the unmanifested, and these are incredibly practical. Let's explore the first one, the inner body.
This portal involves reclaiming consciousness from the mind and directing it into the physical body. Tolle instructs the reader to close their eyes and feel the aliveness in their hands, their feet, their abdomen. Not to think about their hands, but to feel the subtle vibrational energy field within them.
I was trying to practice this yesterday, and I found it's almost impossible to stay in my body for more than a few seconds before the mind drags me away to think about dinner.
It takes practice.
But when I actually managed to just feel the buzz in my hands, it was like the volume on the radios in my head instantly dropped.
And there is a profound biological mechanism at work here. When you inhabit the inner body, you anchor yourself in the now. The mind cannot easily drag you away into past or future scenarios.
Because you're physically anchored.
Exactly. Because you are not projecting into a hypothetical stressful future, your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, powers down. Your parasympathetic nervous system takes over.
The rest and digest system.
Yes. Tolle explicitly states that this practice strengthens the immune system. The body is no longer wasting immense energetic resources fighting phantom threats created by the mind. It can use that energy to heal and regenerate. He even claims that removing psychological time from the cells actually slows the aging process.
That makes total sense biologically. If you aren't constantly marinating your cells in cortisol from endless worrying, your body operates optimally. Okay, the second portal, silence and space. This one is fascinating.
Tolle suggests that we pay attention to the silence between sounds. When you hear a siren go by in the distance, or a dog bark, don't just listen to the sound itself. Listen to the silence out of which the sound arises and into which it inevitably fades.
Listen to the silence.
Listening to silence immediately creates stillness within you because you cannot actively pay attention to silence without being internally still.
It's like those optical illusions where you see the vase and then your brain shifts and you see the two faces in the negative space. The same applies to visual space.
Yes, the space in the room.
If you look around the room you are in right now, you immediately categorize the objects, the desk, the lamp, the window, but those objects are not the room. The essence of the room is the empty space. Without the empty space, there is no room.
It's foundational.
Just as there is no world of form without the unmanifested source. When you shift your focus from the objects in space to the space itself, it creates a profound gap in your thinking.
Then he introduces a third, much more intense portal, conscious death. This is perhaps the most challenging to grasp mentally.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
He calls it the ultimate portal. He isn't talking about physical suicide. He is talking about the death of the false self. When a person faces extreme physical danger or a devastating loss, or even their own impending physical death, the mind often simply gives up.
It just surrenders.
It can no longer maintain the illusion of control. The false mind-made self is forcibly stripped away. What remains is the radiant true nature. Tolle says every portal is ultimately a portal of death, the death of the ego.
To tie these portals together, I picture the mind like this thick, soupy, claustrophobic fog that completely surrounds you. It obscures everything.
Good visual.
Conscious presence, whether you access it through feeling the inner body or listening to silence or focusing on space, is like taking out a high-powered flashlight. The flashlight doesn't make the whole world clear instantly. It doesn't solve all your worldly problems, but it cuts a brilliant, narrow beam through the fog right in front of you. That illuminated space is the now.
That is an excellent way to visualize it. And the goal, as Tolle points out, is not to retreat to an ashram and sit in a dark room shining that flashlight forever.
Right, you still have to live your life.
The goal is to keep a portal open during everyday life. When you are waiting in line at the grocery store or listening to a friend talk, you can keep part of your attention anchored within your inner body. You become a bridge between the unmanifested stillness and the manifested world of form.
Which is the perfect testing ground for our next topic, because let's be honest, it is relatively easy to feel present and peaceful when you are sitting alone on a park bench.
Oh, absolutely.
The ultimate test of this presence isn't when you are alone, it's when you are thrust into the turbulent world of interacting with other human beings. It's when your ego comes into direct contact with another ego. Let's talk about enlightened relationships.
This is where the rubber meets the road and where Tolle's insights become piercingly diagnostic. He paints a rather bleak but highly accurate picture of normal human relationships.
Yeah, he pulls no punches.
He describes what he calls the love-hate cycle. What we traditionally call love in an intimate romantic relationship is often just an addictive clinging. It is an egoic need to have another person complete us, to fill the gaping hole we feel inside because we're disconnected from our own being.
Right, it's basically a drug. Think about the honeymoon phase. When the partner is meeting all those egoic needs, validating you, making you feel special, prioritizing you, it feels like euphoria. It's a massive dopamine hit.
But it doesn't last.
But inevitably, the partner fails to meet those impossible needs. They say the wrong thing, they want independence, they act unconsciously, or they just forget to text you back. And suddenly, at the flick of a switch, that love turns into savage attack, hostility, or total withdrawal.
Let's trace the exact mechanics of how this happens in real time. Imagine a couple arguing over something trivial, like dishes left in the sink.
The classic argument.
On the surface, it's about the dishes. But internally, the ego of one partner perceives a slight. They didn't do the dishes, which means they don't respect my time, which means I am unlovable.
It escalates so fast.
That thought triggers the pain body. The physical body contracts. Adrenaline spikes. The pain body then uses the partner as a mirror. It lashes out, trying to provoke the partner's pain body.
Looking for a fight.
If the partner reacts defensively, their pain bodies are essentially feeding off each other in a loop of emotional violence. The relationship begins to oscillate between love and hate. And many couples become unconsciously addicted to this drama. It makes them feel alive.
But Tolle warns that avoiding relationships to escape this pain is not the answer either. You can't just move to a cave.
No, you can't escape it.
In fact, he says relationships are excellent spiritual practices precisely because they magnify the ego and flush the pain body out of hiding. They bring all your unconscious patterns to the surface. They are the ultimate mirror.
They really are.
And speaking of the pain body, Tolle dives into a concept here that is both fascinating and potentially controversial. He explores the idea of the collective female pain body and makes the assertion that women might actually be inherently closer to enlightenment than men.
Let's examine this carefully, relying strictly on Tolle's framework. He suggests that the female principle, which is energetically soft, yielding, and open, is more aligned with the energy of being than the male principle, which tends to be hard, rigid, and identified with the thinking mind.
Okay, I follow.
Therefore, the major obstacle for men is typically the continuous, rigid thinking mind. For women, however, the major obstacle tends to be the pain body.
Because women carry not only their personal pain, but a share of the collective female pain body. Tolle attributes this to millennia of subjugation, abuse, exploitation, and the physical pain associated with childbirth and menstruation.
It's a deep historical energy field.
He says this accumulated pain is an energy field that often awakens just before the menstrual cycle.
He notes that premenstrual tension is usually a time when many women are taken over by the pain body, leading to emotional turbulence or physical distress. But he frames this not as a curse, but as an incredible spiritual opportunity.
How so?
He offers a specific guide. Instead of allowing the pain body to take over your thinking and turn you unconscious during this time, use it as an intense spiritual practice. By staying fiercely alert, catching the emotion before it turns into a thought, and simply holding the space of knowing and feeling it within the body, a rapid transmutation of all past pain becomes possible.
It's a powerful reframing. But it brings up a big question for me. If I do all this work, if I dissolve my pain body, if I become fully conscious and present, do I still even need a relationship? Or does the whole biological and psychological drive for a partner just disappear?
That's a great question.
Tolle says something wild here. He says we need to give up the relationship with yourself.
That phrase sounds paradoxical, but it holds the key to true love. Let's unpack it. When you have a relationship with yourself, you have split yourself in two. You have the I and the myself.
Back to the two selves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You judge yourself, you pity yourself, you hate yourself, or you take pride in yourself. It's a mind-created duality. When you are enlightened, that split is healed. You simply are.
You no longer have a self to protect, defend, or feed.
And when you no longer need to defend a false self, your relationship with your partner changes entirely. You no longer need them to fulfill an addictive need, and you no longer judge them for failing to do so. You accept them completely as they are.
Unconditional acceptance.
You create a clear space of no mind within the relationship. And it is only in that clear space that true love, free of the love-hate cycle, can finally flourish. The partner ceases to be a utility for your ego's survival.
That is beautiful. But we don't just relate to other people, we have to relate to life itself, which brings us to our final major hurdle. Because life is going to throw curveballs. Illness, disaster, being stuck in terrible traffic, losing a job, losing a loved one. How do we deal with the inevitable, crushing challenges of life without slipping right back into the mind's resistance?
The answer is surrender. But we must be very careful to define what Tolle means by surrender, because the word carries a massive amount of cultural baggage.
It sounds like giving up.
Exactly. But surrender is not fatalistic resignation. It's not throwing your hands in the air, giving up, and becoming a victim of circumstance. It is not lethargy or weakness.
It's the exact opposite. Tolle defines true surrender as the simple, profound wisdom of yielding to the flow of life rather than opposing it. And since the only place you can experience the flow of life is the oblin. Now, to surrender means to accept the isness of the present moment unconditionally. It means relinquishing inner resistance.
He uses a wonderful anecdote from nature to illustrate this, the duck fight lesson.
I love this part.
He says he used to watch ducks floating peacefully on a pond. Occasionally, two ducks would get into a sudden, vicious fight over territory that lasts for a few seconds. Then, they separate, swim in opposite directions, and vigorously flap their wings a few times.
And then they just swim on peacefully as if nothing happened. They flap their wings to release the excess energy, the adrenaline. What they don't do is swim away and start building a mental script like, I can't believe he did that. He always disrespects me. He thinks he owns this pond. Next time I see him, I'm going to bite his tail feathers.
Exactly.
They don't build an identity around the past. They release it physically and return immediately to the now.
But human beings, identified with their minds, hold on to the resistance. We replay the duck fight in our heads for years. Now, how does this apply when facing serious disaster, like a major illness?
It's a lot harder than a duck fight.
It is.
Okay.
But Tolle says you don't surrender to the abstract mental concept of illness. Illness is a label that has a past and a projected future. It exists in your life situation, but it is not your life, which is timeless.
Right. If you surrender to the idea of, I have a terrible illness and it's going to ruin my life, you're just creating a victim identity based on a future projection.
Exactly.
Tolle says you narrow your focus down to this exact millisecond. You surrender to the physical sensation happening right now, the pain, the weakness, the discomfort. You don't label it. You just allow it to be.
And by doing so, you remove the psychological time from the illness. You stop the mind from creating a narrative of despair.
But let me offer a final pushback here. If I just accept everything, if I just surrender to the present moment, how do I ever change a bad situation? Say I am literally stuck in the mud, or I am dealing with a deeply abusive person. Doesn't surrender just mean I stay in the mud and take the abuse because I am accepting the isness of the moment?
This is where Tolle draws a brilliant line between complaining and taking action. Surrender does not mean you say, I am stuck in the mud and I accept this is my life forever. That is resignation.
Okay, so what is it?
Surrender means you acknowledge without judgment or emotional negativity, I am currently stuck in the mud. You don't label the mud as bad. You don't get angry at the mud for being muddy. You accept the isness of the moment.
The flashlight cuts through the fog. You stop fighting the reality of the mud.
And from that clear, non-reactive space, you take positive action. You do everything you can to get out of the mud. But your action is driven by a clear assessment of the mud. Now, not by anger or frustration.
That makes total sense.
The same applies to an abusive person. You don't surrender to their abuse. You can say a firm, high-quality no or walk away from the situation entirely. But you do it without harboring inner hatred, without going into a reactive defense, without making them into an enemy in your mind. You respond with clear action, free of negativity.
It's acting from a place of power and presence rather than reacting from a place of fear and conditioned history.
And that brings us to the culmination of everything we've discussed today.
Yes, as we wrap up our time here in the Book Nook, let's summarize why the power of now matters so much. This book is, essentially, an instruction manual for a prison break.
A mental prison break.
It is a guide to reclaiming your consciousness from the relentless, destructive, and ultimately insane machinery of the egoic mind. It is about shifting from being a helpless victim of your own thoughts to becoming the master of your own presence.
And who would benefit most from reading this? Truly, anyone who feels trapped in a cycle of anxiety. Anyone who finds themselves endlessly waiting for someday to finally be happy.
Which is most of us.
Anyone who is exhausted by acting out the exact same dramatic, painful cycles in their relationships over and over again. If you feel that undercurrent of unease in your life, this book provides the map out of it.
And we want to leave you with a final provocative thought derived directly from Tolle's teachings, something for you to mull over. We've talked about how presence heals your personal pain, but what if the universe is actually relying on you to become conscious?
I love this concept.
Tolle suggests that your personal awakening isn't just a self-help tool for your own peace of mind. What if you becoming present is actually the universe's way of knowing itself? What if, without your conscious presence, the very evolution of cosmic consciousness is stalled? You aren't just saving yourself, you are a crucial part of the universe waking up.
It is a profound responsibility,
Yeah.
but also an incredible liberation.
It truly is. We want to invite you to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss an insightful deep dive into the books that are shaping our world.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.
So the next time you find yourself caught in that cavernous room, when those 100 radios in your head are blaring at maximum volume, creating a wall of anxiety and noise, remember that you don't need to find the power switch to turn them off. You just need to realize that you are not the radios. You are the silent, empty space of the room itself. You are the watcher. Be present. We'll see you next time.